In this section with sign numbers, we're going to focus on positive and negative numbers. So when you see these bars, and you'll see these throughout this section, they're referring to absolute value. So absolute value really has to do with how far a number is away from 0 on the number line. So if you can imagine a number line here, and 0 were here, and 26 were here, really what they want to know is how many spaces actually happen between these two. So there would be 26 places. So the absolute value of 26 would be 26. Now in the same way, if I were to look at a number line here, and I had 0, and I had negative 27 down here, they still would like to know how many places are on the number line between those two. And in this one, there would be 27 places. So really the bottom line with absolute value is that absolute value is always a positive number. And if it happens to be a negative, basically what's going to happen is it's going to take the negative value off of there. Okay, that's basically what happens. Okay, now, in this one, when we start to deal with this, we're going to talk a little bit about these numbers, and really I want you to focus on the fact that a lot of these we can deal with like numbers, just like we had money. So if I wanted this to be money, I want you to imagine I added a 0 to each of these. Every time there's a negative value, that would be considered a debit out of your checking account, or that you've written a check. If it's positive, I want you to think about it like a deposit. So in this one, I would have two checks that are here. One check that was $20.70, and it probably makes sense that it's negative because it's taking money away from your account. I also have a check that's $10.50. Now, if I wanted to, I could add those two together and figure out what it would be for one check. So if I wrote one check, it would be like writing one check for $31.20. Now, there's only one deposit of $24.40. So if I look at these two, that's not enough of a deposit to cover this check. In fact, it's going to be short. That means that when I add these two together, I'm going to have a negative number because there's a bigger amount for debit than there is for what you deposited here. So if I want to know how much of a difference, I can subtract them, and that will tell me how short I am for money. So if I subtract these two, if I have that $31.20 and I subtract $24.40 from it, I'm going to end up with $6.80 short. That means it's going to be negative 6.80, or if I took the 0 off because I just added those at the beginning, it would be negative 6.8. Now I do want you to keep in mind, think about this like the number line, or like the money. Depositing is going to be a positive amount, and debiting or writing a check is going to be a negative amount. That will really keep good ideas in your head for this chapter. Now in the next one, if I were to look, these three right here are all checks. So if I put those all together, that would be like writing one check of 13. Then if I look at the rest of these numbers, 1, 3, and 6 would be deposits. So if I put those together, 1, 3, and 6, that gives me a total of 10. Then think about how to put these together. So if I look at these, not enough of a deposit to cover the debit. In fact, I'm $3 short. So negative 3 will be my answer. Now sometimes they'll give you actual problems like this where they're word problems, and we're going to have to kind of figure out what we're doing here. So on 3 consecutive passes, a football team gains 7 yards, loses 16 yards, and gains 46. What number represents the total net yardage? So if I gain 7, I lose 16, and I gain 46. So I should be able to make positive and negative numbers out of those. So really the 7 and the 46 are things that are positive, like my deposits before. So 46 and 7 together would give me 53. And I have one debit, if you want to think about it that way, of $16. So I definitely have enough to cover my debit, so my answer is going to be positive. And if I subtract these two, I would have 37 left over, so that means this would be a 37-yard gain in this problem. Okay, now here's a couple of them, and when we start to deal with subtraction, there's going to be kind of another piece we're going to have to deal with here. So in this case, when I'm going to look at this, there's one piece that you need to remember, and that's that two negatives make a positive. So this is really like writing a statement like this. So 13 and 15 and 14, if I were to add them all together, would give me 42. Now, that two negatives equals a positive only happens when they're directly after each other. So this would be one that would qualify. So it would end up looking like -4 minus 7 plus 11. So really, if I go to kind of look at these, I have a -4 here. I could treat this like a -7 and then a positive 11. So here's my deposit. These two are my debits. So my debits together are like writing one check of 11. I have a deposit of 11. So those are exact opposites. They cancel each other out and give you 0. So that's your final answer. Now, the two negatives equaling a positive is something that will continue actually in multiplication. It's not often that our rules for adding and subtracting will also work for multiplying and dividing, but this is one rule that will. So in this one, you'll notice there's two negatives, so those two negatives make a positive. And then I'm just going to go through and multiply my numbers out. So 5 times 7 is 35, times 8 would be 280. Now in this one, two negatives would be a positive. I have one negative that's left over. That means that my answer is going to have to be negative. And I'm just going to go through and multiply my things out. So on this one, 50 times 3 is 150. Times 20 would be 3,000. Times 3 would be 9,000. So your answer is going to be negative 9,000. Now, in this kind of a problem, it's going to be important really to solve the top and get it down to one number, and the bottom and get it down to one number, and then worry about what this bar is going to mean as far as dividing. So let's go through this. So first of all, two negatives here make a positive. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. So on this, if I were to look at it, 3 times 3 is 9. On the bottom down here, 3 times 3 is 9, which is going to equal 1. Okay, the next one. Remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. No parentheses or exponents, so multiplying and dividing comes next. So here's your multiplying and dividing. Now this is almost like it's a -72. So -72 divided by 9. First of all, there's not two negatives to make a positive, so the answer's got to be negative. 72 divided by 9 would be 8. So basically this is 2 minus 8, which would be -6. Now here's another one where we have kind of a top and a bottom. Let's solve our top and get it down to one number, our bottom and get it down to one number, and then we'll solve. So on this one, we just have adding and subtracting, so really it's just going left to right. So 6 and 9 would be 15. 15 minus 11 would be 4. Now on this one, these two 5s are opposites because it's negative 5 and positive 5. So they're actually going to cancel. And that's just going to be 2. So 4 divided by 2 is going to be 2. Much easier to solve these when you get it down to one number on the top and one number on the bottom.